he Māori. Ia nei rā, ko te tūmanako ka te ata whakarongo mātau ki tēnei awangawanga. Nō reire e pā i tēnei wā, ko te tūmanako o te ngākau ka huri te kaha ko tō mātau tiamana Rex ki runga i tōna mate. Ko te tūmanako te ngākau ka tai te ora ki aia. Nō reire ko e nei mea ka pātai ki runga te ingo i hukurati a kāke. Amen.
Thank you, Mike. So we have apologies for lateness from Neil, so he's going to be in at 10 a.m. Are there any other apologies? Doesn't look like it. We should put apology for James as well.
I agree with the apologies.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Balford. Seconds. Are there any notices? No notices. Then we'll move on to item 2. Any conflict of interests? No conflict of interest. Therefore, we will move into the agenda. Now, before we do, Alan, you've got a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wish to question the format of this meeting, and in particular, the intention to attempt to do everything in one day. Now, I've been on this council for 10 years, and unless my memory fails me, this has never been attempted before. I think it's vitally important for the submitters that they're given a fair hearing and that deliberation is kept entirely separate from those, considering those submissions or hearing submissions. Also, note that there are very good reasons why, in the normal course of things, meetings do not proceed past a duration of 6 hours. And that is simply because, as I've observed and others will have as well, that the quality of debate and the quality of decision making can often be compromised if people are tired and have had a very, very full day. So I don't know whose idea it was, but in my view, it's not a good idea. I'll be interested in your comments.
I tend to agree on a couple of things. I'm not sure where this came from. I was probably advised, but can't recall, Alan, if I was, but to bring it to one day. But it's a very big day, especially if we think we're going to discuss all these items at the end of the day. That's one I want to hand over to councillors, but my second comment is I tend to agree with the 6 hours. Certainly of late I have noticed that people start drifting off, and certainly our last meeting was almost a disaster because we were down to a quorum. If someone went to the bathroom, we wouldn't have had a quorum. So perhaps we should have a discussion on that and how we keep these meetings down to the 6 hours, so we don't have people drifting off, and we don't have people drifting off at the table, because you have to concentrate during the whole period, and it can be wearisome. So that I tend to agree with everything you say. Do we have any other thoughts? Do we have any other thoughts? Because this is going to go over the 6 hours, and it's Paul.
What's the alternative if we were to say hear all the submissions today and then deliberate on another day? Would we have to organise another council meeting at some point in the very near future, or?
There were originally 2 days set. Today, tomorrow. There's nothing on this Wednesday.
Because the other alternative would be to wait and see how we feel about it at the end of the day and make a decision then.
Yeah, that's a point. Councillor Barker.
A 1,000-mile journey starts with a single step. The sooner we start, the sooner we'll get to the end. At the end of it, if we feel we can postpone the deliberation to another day, which I think would be a good idea, let's make that decision then. We've got people waiting for submissions. If we get to a slow start, we'll be slow all the way through the day.
Councillor, we're not on a slow start, we're dead on time. We're having a discussion and we are on time. Councillor Dick, are you happy that we get through this in a judicious manner and see what we're like at the end of the session. We do.
That we take a pause and make a decision as to whether
Okay.
we do deliberations, attempt to do deliberations properly today, or defer it for a day or two.
Okay, then that's what we'll do. That's your suggestion, Paul, and that's what we'll do. Okay, we are running a little bit early, but Richard, you're here, so we might as well get straight into your submission. Thank you very much. Come up the front. Now, Leanne.
Just speak into the microphone and everybody can hear you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, good morning, Richard, and welcome. You're very welcome here today. Now, because we've got so many people, we have 10 minutes, you have 10 minutes, and we're going to have to be very strict to be fair to everybody through the process. So if you want questions from councillors, take that into account.
Okay.
Because it all happens within the 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, mate.
Thank
Your
you.
floor is yours. You do it.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, councillors. Thank you very much. I hope to have the shortest submission of the day. 2 weeks ago, I attended a presentation by your principal scientist, Dr. Andy Hicks, in this room. He spoke about Lake Tuterra with particular reference to algal blooms. It was an excellent presentation. This room was packed with council staff. It was a very, very good presentation. I don't know if you've seen his presentation yourselves. I'd totally recommend that a time is organised for you to see his presentation. I think it was excellent. So my question simply is this: I'd like to know, is there an opportunity for presentations like this to be advertised more widely to allow people interested in Lake Tuterra to be kept informed about the future restoration of the lake? And that's the end of my submission.
Thank you very much, Richard. Paul, have you got a thought on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your submission, Richard. Especially thank you for your interest in Tuterra, which is a body of water which is very dear to my heart. Part of the process, and that's going through my mind in terms of how we deal with the issue of Lake Tuterra, and as part of the process in terms of being one of the hotspots, is improving public consultation. And thank you for raising the issue about advertising more widely the likes of Dr. Andy Hicks's discussions around the lake, and I'm sure that's something I'll be keeping in mind and taking on board. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Has anyone else got a question or I have a comment. I really appreciate you raising it. As you know, we're trying to put a councillor in charge of each one of our hotspots so they can report back, and so Paul is the one. He's our ambassador for. So if you want to talk to him, his phone is always open. I know he's really keen to talk about all the issues, and we're all deeply worried. And that report that you're referring to was outstanding and just really epitomises the wonderful work that some of our scientists do.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wish to say to councillors on this?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
It's quite quick, 7 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the timetable lists the submission number, but could the secretary perhaps at the start of each item give us the page number so we can find the submission?
I went through and that is right.
Huh?
I went through and put them all. Page numbers would have been excellent on this.
Yeah.
Would have been.
I'll see if I can find them, okay?
So we're in. Yeah, 128, Alan. Next one. 128, page 128. Yes. Grenville, would you like to come up now?
Yeah, Sharleen wants to come with us.
Okay, Sharleen. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, certainly. Come on up now. You might.
Give us about 3 hours.
Yeah. We've got June ticking us all off down here, mate. So we're going to be. Now, Grenville, what we'll do, Grenville and Shannon, so welcome. It's great to see you again. What we'll do is, with 10 minutes, at 8 minutes, I'll go like this. I won't go like this. I'll go like this.
I'm more used to the other one,
victory.
actually.
Just to let you know that how it's running. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. The floor is yours.
Well, we're just kind of thinking that we might just go through what we're going to say, and then we can have a bit of a discussion if that's
Yeah,
quite
you've got
cool.
10 minutes, Grenville. That's the,
Yeah.
And
But,
I know it's short time, and I'm really sorry
well,
about
there's
that.
three of us here, so that's 30 minutes.
No, it doesn't quite work like that.
Did under Fenton.
Oh, they're separate. So
Yeah.
separate time. Oh no, you're right. Oh,
I don't hear that often.
So you're on, mate. So you've got
Okay.
a bit of time.
Well, I'll just talk to Forest and Birds briefly. I mean, we're all pretty similar, but we applaud what's been the new direction of the council. We think it's great. We're hoping for basically a environmental renaissance. So we really support the direction of cleaning up these hotspots. We know it's going to cost money, and I'll sort of get to that shortly. Our concerns have always been things around like the flushing flows. I know the James Palmer report pretty much indicated they weren't going to do the job. And also the receiving environment has always been a major concern. It's always going to end, even if they did work, basically it was going to end up in the sea. And it was also going to obviously do a lot of damage in the aquifers, in the lagoons as well. And of course we have problems with the river basically having virtually no headroom for nitrates, and yet there's a disconnect when you look through the various reports with indicating that more nitrates could be put on legally, supposedly, on farms within the irrigated zone. So major concerns about that. We support the fact that people are going to need to be researched. There's going to be costs there in that research. Definitely the land water adjustments required under Plan Change 6 is going to need help for people to get their heads around that, and support for new types of farming and that sorts of things. We see the biodiversity strategy needs support, more money there, and one which is currently close to our heart is the beach raking. Now there's a new Tuki environment management plan there, which actually closes a period, a greater period where beach raking can occur. So that really means that this beach raking, which happens on the rivers, is going to have to be shoved into a smaller window. The reason for that broader area where beach raking shouldn't occur is to protect native bird nesting sites on the rivers. Now, I've said to Graham Hanson, I said, don't you worry about, because we've talked to them and to Graham, and budget's mentioned, and I said, well, I'll argue for the budget. And so I'm very supportive of money being spent on environmental necessities, and in particularly, I think there'll be money needed to go there into the beach raking, either dry hiring or hiring a new machinery and perhaps new implements, another implement to get that job done. So we fully acknowledge there's money to be spent. I guess our argument up to now, and still kind of holds, that we do believe that the off-spin of the dam with the intensive farming and various, but the flushing flows are not working, and all these other points we've raised over the years, to actually spend money and allow that to happen is defeating the purpose. And so that's sort of been our argument up to now, is that use the money put aside for the dam, but I am fully aware that $60 million, which is still sitting in the pot, is for capital development. But the line we're putting forward really is, well, what about the interest that's occurring? Why could not that be used? So we'd quite like the answer to that question. Why could not that money be used? Because essentially, reading the response from the staff, they're saying that $60 million, the earnings of that is actually to go into the pot to be spent for things so rates don't go up. So that is one point Forest and Bird's making, and it's also in my submission. So that's, I guess, pretty much covered what we've sort of said, and I'll just throw that over to Sharleen if she wants to add a few more points.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa. Things I want to add is the fact that I did want to say that personally I'd be happy to pay for an increase for the remedial environmental work that is urgently needed. However, like Grenville, I think that other options of spending some other money first would appeal more to me. Two things I wanted to add just to you today. I work in tourism, in the tourism industry, and I know that there's mixed views in the tourism industry about where money's spent by this council. My experience has been that people still really want the clean green experience. We have American people flying in to do trout fishing in our area, and they're becoming increasingly concerned about the state of the river. And these are exactly the type of tourists that we want. They spend a lot of money and they have a low carbon footprint, apart from getting here. So that was one that I wanted to reiterate. The other thing was, Grenville touched on, funding for the monitoring of the farm environment management plans. And the third thing was just to support you really as a council. You have a mandate. Hawke's Bay voted you in to fight for the environment, and I believe that the previous council was rather laissez-faire about the environment, and that's why the hotspots are in the trouble they are today. So I would like you to continue to be bold and continue on your path, which will be hard, and just kia kaha, stand tall, because that's why we voted for you.
Thank you very much. Questions, councillors? You were very, for the time, I'm checked, Grenville, you do have the full 30 minutes. very carefully, very cunningly done that. So, councillors, do you have questions? Councillor Rayleigh.
Thank you, Chair. Grenville and Sharleen, thank you for your presentation. As residents of Central Hawke's Bay, were you aware of the content of the submission made by the Central Hawke's Bay District Council?
Actually, no, I wasn't.
Okay. In the submission, just to prompt a wee bit, in their submission they argue that it's not necessary to have the environmental hotspots in the Tukituki and Whātuma catchments because that'll be covered under Plan Change 6. What would your feeling be if we were to, say, redirect that funding into, say, the biodiversity strategy?
A lot of that, I'd have to think about that, and because I can't just take that on board right now. It really depends on what that biodiversity strategy is going to encompass.
I would actually like to respond to that too. I don't think you should put one thing against another. I mean, it's important that the water quality remains one of the highest priorities, and the biodiversity strategy will kind of follow on from that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's probably a bit unfair, Chair, to be consulting on something and then throwing in another what if in this round of negotiations when a number of people have submitted on an issue. And yeah, I think that last question was unfair coming from the...
Point of order, Chair. The biodiversity strategy, the biodiversity strategy has put a submission in, so it is part of what this process is all about.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering for both of you, and I know you live and overlook Lake Whātuma. Are you concerned that there's no plan in place to be doing any remedial work there? That there's a rate increase without a plan? And are you concerned as to whether that money will actually end up there in in the Tookie catchment being spent, or that it might be siphoned off by a majority of councillors once the rate increase is there and put into another area?
Well, there is actually a very, very good report on Whātua, so a lot of money which could be spent doesn't need to be spent, with a series of a series of choices as to what direction to go for to improve the health of that lake. Again, I need to think about that. I would like to see that if there's money to be designated to Whātua, that's where it goes, whatever the process.
Thank you, and thank you for your submission, and thank you for your support for stronger environmental expenditure or proposed stronger environmental expenditure on the part of this council. You raised the $60 million that hasn't been spent yet. That's actually, and the interest on it, which might be allocated in some way, that's actually created a hole in our budget, because right now that money was going to be invested in the dam and would be earning 6%, which would be like $4 million return. Instead, 60 of the $80 million is sitting in the bank earning 2%. So it's probably, I don't know, Paul can tell you the numbers, but it's probably created, in fact, a $2 million hole in terms of the budget that we thought we'd get in our 10-year plan. So that's a reason why we've had to consider a rates increase to make expenditure in areas that we don't think can wait. Now, you said you were worked in the tourism industry, I think. The annual plan has us spending $1.8 million on tourism. Now, we could, in theory, divert some of that money. Where do you think this council's priority should lie?
Oh, with the environment. I mean, that's what tourists are telling us. They'd rather have clean water, the clean green thing, experience, than it going into more advertising or more promoting overseas. I think it has to be a priority now because they're starting to wake up. I actually get disgruntled tourists coming in and saying to me, I didn't realise how bad the water was in New Zealand.
Can I just respond to the money? Now, Peter, you're saying if that money was invested in, I think you actually said in the dam, it would be returning 6%, but in reality we'd be borrowing 6%. We'd be digging a hole. So by not being invested in the dam at this present time, it's actually returning 2% of 60 million. What did you come to that? What was that? I haven't actually worked that out, but I think that would pretty much cover your proposed, 1.4 required in rate. So that's the point I'm sort of making, that actually by not investing that money in the dam as it stands, there was a projected debt to pay that 6% dividend of considerable millions. I mean, the top end of it was 80 million projected over perhaps 30 years. Well, that's a cost until it, and so there's a savings there immediately by not investing in the dam at this point in time, and so you're actually winning that 2%. So I'd argue that 2% should be going into the council's back pocket, and yes, but you have a budget hole, and it should be massaging that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested, you talk about the interest of the 60 million alone. Would you support us actually putting capital into the environment?
Well, I think that I would support that, because I think economics are often very, very skewed, and they don't put a value on the environment, as Charlene's talking about, just from a tourist point of view. But there's all sorts of far more deeper embedded values in the environment. A damaged environment costs a lot of money to fix. So you could well argue that it's well worth a capital expenditure to improve the environment in the short term than allowing long-term damage to the environment, where the cost will be not just counted in money, but counted probably in misery, human misery. So yeah, I'd actually support that.
I'd like to add to that, though, as long as it's not at the expense of selling off any assets such as the port or any part of it, because I think that's another issue that I wouldn't support.
And just to go on, I mean, I realise that, look, there's a choice for all these things. If you don't have capital working, well, that either can often mean a rate rise or a cut in services. And nobody wants a rate rise, nobody wants a cut in services. So it's quite tricky. I mean, preferably out of income, of course. But those are the things you guys have got to wrestle with, really, and take the flak for it one way or the other. Yeah, both ways probably.
Is the goodwill created by working on the 6 hotspots superior to the flack we would take for voting $60 million toward this dam?
I think that I think you'd cop a lot more flack for throwing 60 million at the dam, really. You know, that would cause an explosion of flack. You know. And as I say, to some extent we've used this opportunity to say, hey, to point out there is a contradiction, particularly within the projected environmental outcomes of intensive farming and all the rest of it, and here we are, let's try and clean things up while this thing's still on the table. Now, I realise things have moved on to some extent with the environmental condition precedent, and if that is all what it's supposed to be, to some extent it does answer some of those concerns, but also as a concerned citizen and a member of Forest and Bird, we're actually horrified, I'm horrified, that this council has led the charge in basically undermining what is national status of conservation land. If this council wins its court case, it opens the door to conservation land being eroded for whatever reason, whoever could put up the argument at the time. And it's not a good thing. And I hark back to the first business meeting, and Councillor Rick Barker was right on the money. This council lacks an ethical investment policy of any standing. I've made inquiries and there's just some flowery words. And I've read the flowery words way back in 2010 at hunting through regional council, and it sort of says it's got to do the sustainable practices, which is good for the future and blah, blah, blah. Totally ignored as far as I can see in the past. And I think that with a true ethical investment policy, we wouldn't even be here today. The questions which finally got to this table and been addressed by this council, which I'm incredibly grateful for, should have been addressed right at $20 million ago.
We're not allowed to make statements, so I will say, do you know that the Tai Whenua has discussed the business of the 60 million and would totally agree that a percentage of that, preferably $10 million, be used on cleaning up the environment? And also, Kathleen, the word kia kaha means be strong, kia tu means stand up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I have a question for you, Grenville, I think. So Lake Whātuma, it's one of our hotspots, and basically the process of the hotspots is that with that $1.2 million with 6 million, or 6 hotspots to look at how best we fix them, really, so create the business plans around how we fix them. So do you have a view, because there's a view in the water storage thing that Whātuma needs water from a water storage scheme. So what's your thoughts on how we would fix Whātuma? And do we need extra water?
I do think that the lake was artificially lowered about 40 years ago. which has done it no service. It's done it a disservice, a major disservice. And there were people at the time saying we don't want it to happen, and my understanding it was just the law was there, it was passed by the government, and locals, most of the landowners at that time were quite happy to leave it where it was, but one insisted, and that was a law, and so it went down. So we come to the question of would what we were talking about, where flows from water storage going through that lake. Well, under the present under the 30, if we're talking about the dam, it's a 35-year contract. Now, without going into the whole ecological argument about mixing waters and all the rest of it, let's just talk about it's a 35-year contract based on the goodwill of all the people in Hawke's Bay. So in 35 years' time, who knows what the situation is, whether that goodwill would still exist, whether the plug could just be pulled on that lake again and it'd be right back where it is. I think there are some decisions there which are going to take a lot of conversations with people, and again within that, I think it's a year 2000 report, misnamed as on Hatuma, but a series of options for people for if that lake was raised, because I actually think that the long-term welfare of Whātuma is for it to retain more catchment, for it to become more of a storage to some extent for the health of the lake, and it's only really returning it to the 1970s level. It would be a tricky one, but a stroke of a pen lower that lake, and a stroke of a pen can lift that lake, and you could argue that those people who have benefited for 40 years of that lake being lowered have had a fair go. So that would roughly be my view. But there's all sorts of things. There's people there who want to subdivide their paddock. Well, perhaps if they donated their land, which would only be a certain, not a huge amount, and it's no good to them, to reserve fund. There's all sorts of options there. What could come into play, but what would be really needed, it would have to have very, very good flood control gates. You would have to be able to make sure that if you're raising that lake to store more water, that you could also let it go quickly when we get a lot of rain. So there were some challenges, but I do think catchment is the best solution.
So the only rationale for lowering the lake in the first place was to make more farmland available?
Yeah, yes.
So is your view that we should just simply give back to the lake what we took off it?
Well, I think we should put the lake first, as we're putting the rivers first. I think that we should try and rally as much goodwill around that lake as we can. Past councillor Tim Gilbertson said it was a jewel in the crown, and it is. And it could be so much more. There's so much work there. I know that work's been offered for locals. If the dam goes ahead, well, there's a ton of work restoring around that lake, planting. There's all sorts of things which could go in there to create work for local people. So yeah, I think that we should be looking at as it was. To some extent, it can never be as it was. It used to go almost into the township, as Mike would be able to testify. But it can still be something.
Point of order, I'm not that old.
I'm not wearing my glasses.
Other questions? Are there any other final comments that you'd like to make?
Well, we have mentioned several times, I've mentioned from the Board of Inquiry, even back before that, flushing flows. Flushing flows to me is, we've just been pointed out. Now, I haven't got it on the top of my head. Tom will probably know. What's the allocation for flushing flows as it stands?
4 million.
Okay. Now, and 4 flushing flows? 1 million flushing flows. Well, if 1 million only does to the end of Waipawa, to where the Waipawa River meets the Tuki. Say that's 20 k's. Well, you've got another 100 k's to get to the mouth of the river. So you've got to multiply up that, and you're starting to, what are we doing? Another 5. So 5 fours, 20 million cubic metres or so extra. With any hope of it possibly working, and I mean, there's so many flaws in it of pushing the weeds to the sides. But the reality is, nobody's told me about the ultimate receiving environment. What's it going to do when all that weed slime, that periphytons you call them, which have been growing on the nutrients and they're full of nutrients, and they hit that salt water and then they explode and release all those nutrients. What's that going to do? I mean, nobody's ever answered that. And I mean, we all know what it's going to do. It's just going to pollute our marine environment. So I thank the council anyway for its new direction.
Thank you very much.
And if there is no other option, we won't oppose the rate rise.
Thanks, Grenville. Sharleen, have you got a final comment you'd like to make?
I would just like to
Certainly.
add that I do mean to say to you, kia kaha, be strong, because I think you're going to have to be over these next few years. And just remember your mandate.
Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could we have page numbers for those 2 submissions?
Next one's 135.
Huh?
135. Oh, the next one. Oh, you want those two?
92,
I can do that.
91, and then the next one.
So, number 87 was page 128. Number 92, which was Charlene's, was page 155.
Yeah.
And Grenville's was page 154, submission 91.
Okay.
Now, the next one, Dr. Le Lievre, is page 135.
Thank you.
Taiao is page 130. Mr. Taylor is page 167.
Yeah.
And Hawke's Bay Tourism is page 169.
That'll do for the moment.
Trevor, where is he? Oh, you're here.
I'm on.
I blinked, mate. Okay, Trevor, welcome. So you know the rules here. We've got you've got 10 minutes. That includes councillors' questions. So, if more questions you want,
Indeed.
and you'll assume that councillors have all read your paper. Okay.
Absolutely, and
Off
I'll
you
just
go.
mention at the outset that this will be a very different presentation to the last one. I have a set presentation which will take the 10 minutes I envisage, so
No questions.
we'll have to take any questions in the smoker room afterwards.
Okay.
Which I'm happy to do.
Which you're happy to do. Okay,
Which I'm
good
happy
one.
to do.
Righto, you're on your way.
Good morning, councillors, and thank you for making the time to hear my submission. This morning I intend to present roughly in the subject order of my written submission. My underlying theme is one of commendation for returning to your core environmental mandate, tempered by my belief that right now council do not have the political capital to be asking ratepayers for increases. My key message being drop the dam, which has served only to alienate ratepayers from council, and to rebuild goodwill by demonstrating that council has its house in order. And I note that I'm recorded as being for a 9.88% increase. I most certainly am not, for reasons that I'm about to explain. Environmental mandate. Firstly, welcome to incoming councillors Bailey, and I would be welcome Councillor Curtin if he was here, but I'll speak to his chair as if he were. And of course also to the incumbents here who clearly did a good enough job during their last term in the eyes of their constituents to warrant re-election. The election outcome gives council a clear environmental mandate, especially the return of Councillor Belford, who emerged triumphant from the trenches, having sustained heavy fire for daring to expound an environmental vision that excluded the Ruataniwha Dam. Also to Councillor Curtin, who in his manifesto undertook to fully assess the environmental evidence pertaining to the dam and immediately upon election called for a moratorium to do just that. Lastly, I commend Councillor Bailey for his bold and unashamed Can the Dam campaign,
which clearly resonated with his Napier constituents. Now, having earned that environmental mandate, it is incumbent upon councillors to implement it. Lake Whatumā. I described the lake, and apparently Tim Gilbertson stolen my thunder, as the jewel in the crown of Central Hawke's Bay. However, it's currently an unpolished jewel which council could certainly contribute to putting a sheen on. I'm thinking here of a partnership model with local council, Tangata Whenua and DOC, which would enhance the lake's natural features and open it up for recreational use. Primarily, the lake level needs to rise, which would require a political exercise of engagement with local landowners. I'm suggesting a raised walkway around the lake's perimeter, as has successfully occurred in the Peka Peka swampland, and improved public access, which currently comprises a gated and unformed easement indistinctly signposted off Racecourse Road. Hawke's Bay Parks and Trails. Here I'm suggesting a concerted native planting program, and while I've singled out Lindsay Bush, there are a number of other local reserves which would benefit from attention. I've also suggested planting the growing network of local cycleways, both formed and in the pipeline. Anything council could do to help resurrect the Waipakarau Waipawa cycleway alongside State Highway 2 would be well received. The Tukituki catchment. The catchment's rivers are under intensive pressure from pollutants caused predominantly by intensive dairying. Intensive farming can only occur with large-scale water allocation, and council have been enablers in this regard historically by over-allocating consents. Over-allocation has been identified by council staff as far back as 2008, when Christine Scott, past councillor, and others granted consents for 3 large-scale Central Hawke's Bay dairy conversions against staff advice, on the specious grounds of sunk investment in conversion infrastructure. The solution is not the dam, which would facilitate industrial-scale irrigation and more intensive farming. We all know what happened to the old lady who swallowed the fly. The solution is twofold. Firstly, a sinking lid policy on the issuing of high-volume consents for intensive farming. This option is supported by the findings of the recent review, that the Ruataniwha plains are currently dominated by intensive livestock production, and that low nitrogen leaching land uses such as arable farming, vegetable cropping and horticulture, i.e. apple and grapes, should be encouraged. Secondly, monitoring. Council's inadequate monitoring resources are, since Havelock North, in the public spotlight. There is little merit in scientifically calculating and then consenting sustainable water use volumes if uptakes are not then comprehensively monitored and enforced. Plan Change 6. Plan Change 6's ambitious nutrient management targets are to be applauded. However, I believe that council need to roll up their sleeves and muck in with the farming community by providing more advisors able to meet farmers in the field and work alongside them in developing farm environmental management plans. This would ensure a better understanding of some of the challenges faced by farmers, relieve some of the cost burden, and generate much goodwill and hence buy-in. I return to monitoring. The resources required to monitor the new Plan Change 6 standards, along with Central Hawke's Bay's feedlots and sewerage outfalls, both dirty little enterprises which locals are not proud of, the District Council's drinking water bores, alongside 8,000 backyard water bores across Hawke's Bay, it's just huge. Monitoring is going to be both the key to turning around the declining state of our waterways and the major challenge that council will face. Best use of limited resources. The specific question being, are council judiciously allocating ratepayer money and resources? I submit that this has not occurred historically, and hence the erosion of public goodwill which prohibits a rate increase at this time. While it pains me to do so, I'll list those imprudent decisions. $20 million spent on pursuing a white elephant which has never, ever even been sighted. The outrageous salary paid to the previous CEO while acting HBRC director. The exorbitant legal costs accrued in defending the environmentally indefensible in the cases of both Havelock North and the dock land swap, and the fire sale of 50 years' worth of cash flow from its Napier leasehold properties. Are there areas where savings could be made? Firstly, it's encouraging that there is a consensus amongst councillors to return to core environmental competencies. I've yet to be shown where council get an economic development mandate from. No disrespect to Annie Dundas, who will be submitting after me, but I question council's current funding of Hawke's Bay tourism to the tune of $850,000 per annum, with an additional $900,000 funding increase over the next 3 years. Get the environment right and the economic benefits, including tourism, will flow. Secondly, council need to explain to ratepayers the costs and benefits of retaining HBRC. A back-of-the-envelope calculation shows that this body costs around $200,000 per annum in directors' fees and administration costs. As far as I can tell, HBRC administer the port and the pool of money from the sale of the leasehold properties. I'm somewhat buoyed that the capital structure review, currently underway, is looking at moving the port into direct council ownership, which would surely negate the requirement to retain HBRC. While on the port, I do not support selling down shares to cover the cost of infrastructure upgrades. Councillor Curtin has previously suggested a public offering to Hawke's Bay ratepayers of port development bonds, albeit in the context of subsidising HBRC's dividend to council from the dam. Nevertheless, I believe that bonds and a local monopoly infrastructure asset like the port are clearly the optimal solution in this case as well. Okay, to wrap it up. Council are to be commended for refocusing on their core environmental mandate to protect and enhance our environment. The distraction of the dam over Council's previous 2 terms has been a regrettable period during which time our environment has been neglected. The identified hotspots requiring immediate environmental attention are well thought through and an excellent necessary first step in what will be a long journey to resuscitate Hawke's Bay's precious natural environment. I have suggested additional areas within the central Hawke's Bay region that would also benefit from council resources. However, before subscribing to a rates increase to fund these projects, I need convincing that this newly elected council are doing business differently and channeling their current resources towards the most environmentally effective areas, which does not include a massive dam that will cause further pollution to the very waterways that council wish to protect. Convince me, along with fellow ratepayers, and this time next year I'll be making a very different submission, fully in favour of a rates increase. I also pledge to sell cakes at the front door, if that's what it's going to take, and it'd certainly make a pleasant change from holding a placard and going toe-to-toe with Peter Butler.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm sure Councillor's got your point of view, and we don't have any time for questions as you had calculated, so you can hang around for the cup of tea. And,
certainly.
And
well, you can always refer to my submission if there is anything missed.
Yes, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Okay. Amelia. Guys, you know the rules. We have 10 minutes, and if you want to, everyone would have, well, they won't have read your new one, but they would have read your old one. So if you want to ask questions, you've got to keep it within that time frame.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Yep, thank you. I'm sure most of you know I'm Dr. Amelia McQueen, and I also have Vaughan Cooper here who's going to help out with any questions if you happen to have any at the end. So I'm going to assume that you've read the full submission, done your homework, and I will only just give a few summary comments here today. Taiao is pleased that Regional Council is taking its core duties seriously and recognising the urgency to clean up freshwater bodies within its region. Further to this, it's good to see that the officer's response acknowledging that the Kickstart Fund is part of an ongoing resource-intensive journey, and the need to clean up freshwater bodies will be subject for consideration in the long-term plan in 2018 to 2028. However, there's a few points which require further discussion. The officer's response did not discuss the use of the central government's Environment's Freshwater Improvement Fund to deal with legacy issues. This fund should be central to any resource allocated to cleaning up freshwater bodies in the region. And particularly, I'm sure you will all agree that Lake Tutera falls under a legacy issue. There is an expectation from ratepayers that extra rates allocated to the Kickstart Fund will be used for effective, tangible actions, not for documents or reports outlining what action needs to happen. That is, it's important that the Kickstart Fund is not seen just as a PR exercise without any real action. What's required needs to be well publicised and transparent. Reports and documents outlined in the Kickstart Fund information should be seen as Regional Council core business and therefore should be funded by existing rates. If there is not any money allocated for these types of reports, why not? Any clean-up should include retiring land, purchase of land, reducing agriculture intensification, that will be both fertiliser as well as stock, revisiting and possibly limiting water consents. So thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Questions, councillors? I just have one comment, Amelia. Our staff are very conscious of, that's the $100 million fund, the government, the one that you referred to. Yeah, we're very conscious of leveraging any money that we put in this new rate rise against that fund, and they've already looking at quite extensive leverages in terms of Ahuriri and Tutera. So they were always focused on one of the...
So that has also been applied for?
Yes.
I can understand that that's been applied for.
Yes, and considerable amounts.
That sort of information should be really made clear to the public as well. I think the thing is that you're in danger of having a whole lot of people going more rates and not understanding the full issue. If they can see that you're also using central government money to clean up, I think that they would probably see this as, yes, you are on the right track and you are trying to do as much as you possibly can. If it's just seen as we're asking you for money and that they don't know about that central government fund, that's something that needs to be pointed out.
I appreciate that. I thought we had done that, but I'll have to, not well enough if we hadn't got to you.
Needs to be out there in neon lights.
Yeah, okay, appreciate that. Any other questions, councillors? Yes, welcome, Mr. Curtin.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Can I just take you to your submission and the 1.5 million that suggested spending on the biodiversity strategy? Where exactly would you spend the 1.5 million?
Good questions. I'm actually part of that biodiversity implementation group and been working through on the other side. At the moment we are looking at money to get the whole ball rolling. So this is going to require money for both the trust, getting the trust set up. We're also envisioning guardians being involved in a group there. And obviously there's going to be other costs as well. So it's actually a lot of it is set-up costs to get it going, and then the idea is that we are actually going to be pulling in money from outside the region to be able to do stuff with biodiversity. The other thing that is very important and as part of that whole process is that we're looking at a zonation package, which is requiring some mapping to occur, as well as getting some local people that have got very good ecological knowledge together in the room and doing some decision making at that point in time and writing out prescriptions on that. So there is actually going to be a lot of costs involved in setting this up and getting it going. And we certainly don't want the ball to drop on this. We've done a lot of very hard work up to this point and it needs to keep going. So that money would be probably spent over many bits in terms of that setup.
Thank you, Chair. Amelia, I noted in your in Taiao's submission there's 1.5, but in the biodiversity submission they're talking about 150,000 a year. Is that someone just made a typo there somewhere, or? Yeah.
Yes, there is a little bit of a money discrepancy there. I'd go for the higher figure. I think there's certainly there will be an element of going cautiously, and we don't want to have a overreaction of going no way. But in reality, we need as much money as we can get behind on this biodiversity thing. If you don't have enough money, the danger is that we only get so far and then it stops. It stalls, and we're way behind already with this biodiversity thing. We need to be getting up and moving very quickly on it, and actually having some really good, tangible projects, just like the freshwater clean-up kickstart fund. We need to be actually making some real progress, and the public want to see that. So yeah, more money the better.
Could you comment a little further on the what you say here about the Ahuriri estuary? You all seem quite worried about what Napier City Council is up to.
There is suspicion. I think really what we want to see from the regional council point of view is actually looking at the Ahuriri estuary as a wildlife refuge. It's already been compromised many times over. I think there is a point where we actually say no, there's enough development that's been occurring, and the danger is that if we start having recreation development encroaching on that wildlife area, it's just another compromise. I think the environment's been compromised enough in Ahuriri, so from that perspective I'm concerned that the Napier City Council might be using recreation as a way of developing that area further. There's also pollution issues there, which obviously the regional council needs to have their finger on the pulse on that one. I'm sure they are starting to do that.
Are you making representations to them directly?
The Ahuriri Estuary Society is.
Yeah.
In which case, you have a minute and a bit to make a final statement if you wish.
Do you want to add anything? No?
Vaughan will.
No, Amelia's done a good job.
She has done a wonderful job. Well then, thank you very much, Amelia and Vaughan.
Yep.
Really appreciate that. Really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Man, it's hot here.
Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor, 167.
Yeah, right.
So, Mr. Taylor, we have an overhead here.
Oh, I can see it there.
I can take care of this if you wanted to.
Oh, well.
Well, firstly, I'd like to welcome you here. And
oh, sorry.
Yeah, welcome here. And you have 10 minutes, so if you want council to ask questions, you need to keep it within that frame time. But thanks for doing your presentation. And we'll kick off now.
Okay. Well, I'm here on behalf of the Tukituk River, really, the reserve that runs from River Road down to the seashore, stop bank to stop bank, and Moore Road on the other side. Now, that used to be an iconic place for everybody to go down to, swim, everything like that. Since this, it's slowly been cut off to the public. There's locks on the gate. If you don't get a key from Vince Byrne, you won't get there at all. I would like to drive down there. They say that it's got access to it, but it's only if you can walk or ride a bike. What about all the people that can't? How about the people that would like to go down to the river and park on it? I've been down there now lately, and they say they shut it off. The council workmen say they shut it off because the people dump rubbish down there. Well, if you can get this video up, we'll see how much rubbish the public dump and how much the council dumps down there. Stock on the river. Walking down there one time, I found a sinkhole the size of a billabong. This is the beach raking that takes place. Another great thing for the birds, they don't nest there anymore. It's done they say it's not done in the spring. I've seen them down there in September with the biggest beach raking gear that I've ever seen, ripping up and down. Where's the nesting sites? The poplars, willows and everything on the side there to make the so-called berm, which is a false bank. Here's some of the rubbish. This is dumped down there from Hamoana side of the Tukituk up towards upriver. This is just some. My camera work is very bad. There, look at this. The public dumped that down there? I don't think so. What is this stuff doing down on the riverbed? This is a riverbed. This is the bed of the river. The water comes down, floats through all that. It's got to go into the water level. And this is only some of it. Now that is not dumped down there by the public. This is an excellent shot here, I think. I saw a HAZCAM container down here. That's what I was supposed to have on this. It should come up. There, look at that. HAZCAM box. Tried pulling it out. I couldn't. How does that get down there? They dig trenches and they dump the rubber in the trenches and then they they fill it in. That's the same trench there. I wonder what else is in there. That wasn't done by a member of the public. And I took good surrounding things so that, and I certainly never took it down there and stuck it in there. I couldn't pull that box out of there. There's the area it is in, taking a wider photo to show exactly where it's from. That was dug in there with a digger. I wouldn't like to think what's down and below. There's some more rubbish. Who dumped all that down there? What happens when the flood comes past? It does come in there. Where's that going to go? There's everything from tyres, concrete, bricks, plastic pipe, wire, everything you can name. And that's on a public reserve, which you can't get down to if you've got a car. You've got to walk. Not a lot of people would walk this far. All on the riverbank. All on the riverbed between the stop banks. Here's some of it here, more. I can't see how when the rain hits that and runs into the gravel, which is the riverbed is all made of, where does it go then? It must eventually wind up in the Tukituk itself. And this is a big area. These are not small areas. Oh, bad camera work. I'm not a good camera fella, by the way. This is, what's all this? That's poplar. You can't get anything for it. You can't sell it. It's a waste of time. It's firewood. There is truckloads and truckloads of rubbish dumped on this area. Some of the stuff didn't look too good. I got a sample of it, of the worst looking, but, you know. Concrete, and it's not just rubble, it's big lumps. There's a lump of concrete there, several things. Concrete.
I'll ask you a question as you go. Who do you think's dumping this rubbish down there?
I saw it's council trucks. I saw one, I stopped one, took the number 504. Said it's only dumping, he was only dumping combustible material and there was no concrete there. Well, who's to know under a bit of non-combustible or dirt underneath is concrete, rubble, anything. The stuff there is amazing.
Was that a regional council vehicle?
Regional council vehicle on Friday, 2 Fridays ago, I saw them going in and out, but they were going too far down. I couldn't follow them all the way down because the track got too wet and I couldn't go through, or muddy, I wouldn't take my car through.
What length of the riverbed have you photographed there?
That's about 500, I'm on the Hamawana side of the Black Bridge, facing up the river. I travelled down there. Look at this. I travelled down there, and I would say about half a mile down there, and all this stuff starts happening. The truck drivers told me, oh no, it was like grass clippings and dirt or something. It wasn't. There's concrete. So. And this has been going on for quite a long time, and I've talked to the council, one of the council engineers, and he said that they were filling in the holes between the berm and the bank. They were filling in the holes in the riverbed, because when the river comes past, it sort of floods, it digs these holes out. Well, they were filling them in. That was the idea. And it's on both sides. On the other side of the Black Bridge, the Clive side of the Black Bridge, heading up there, worse dumps. And they dig a hole, push it in, cover it up. I've got those photos, should come up too here. Here, look, tyres. This is not off the back of trucks, off the back of some public's trailer. Here's on the other side. This is from Clive side, Black Bridge up. Now this is where they're taking out, what is that, shingle extraction, huge amount, 1 million tonnes I hear. This, look there. And this is, that's stacked up to be extracted. Meanwhile, Cape View, Tiawonga, East Clive, Hamawana, the shingle erosion on the beach is terrific. This shingle should be coming down to the beach. More. This is on the Hamawana side again. And I had a big...
very close to time, although this is
yeah, okay,
fascinating.
well, now, on one side, on the Clive side of the river, going up about 3/4 of a mile, half a mile, opposite 51 Manga Territory Road. I went in there. There's the biggest sinkhole, a hole dug right into the ground to water the cows, and it's below ground level. It hasn't come up yet. Look at this. Here, this is all dumped on them. On 10 minutes is nearly up, but this is all more. they had dug a huge hole to water the cows down to the water level. There you are, look, what do they dig something like that for? Whitebait recovery or something, is it?
Thank you. Although I'm sure councillors would like to continue to watch this.
Well, what I'd say about this water hole, it's directly opposite Wellwood Road or something. Within 1,000 yards of Wellwood Road, they've got a water hole that goes down to the water table. On the water, on the inside the stop banks, it goes down to the water table there. It's a huge, great drinking hole. I thought I had a photo of it here. And I went and saw the council and they told me, oh no, they've got water reticulation going. Well, no such thing, because I've been down there. This hole is a tremendous big hole. It's on the waterline. I'll put it on the map there, and it's straight opposite Wellwood Road. I can't see how that doesn't float through.
Okay, look, we've got to stop.
Okay, then.
Can you leave me your phone number, please?
Oh, there's a truck taking it down.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Could I ask that we get the chief executive to have a staff member go and see Mr. Taylor and go and look at these things he said?
Oh yeah, I'll take you down there.
And come back to us with a report?
Certainly. All I'm saying is leave me your phone number, I'll be in contact.
I hope so, because I've already talked to Brian Heaps or something like that, an engineer. I took him down there. I said, hey, stand in this hole. I'll take a photo of you down there. He wouldn't do it, but it's...
We have to move on today, but I promise you I'll ring you. You leave,
okay.
Make sure you leave me your phone number.
Thank you very much.
You give it to this man here. Get it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for everything. Yeah.
Okay, Annie, you're on. Thanks, mate. That's what I think of this guy. Hi, Annie. So very warm welcome to you, Annie.
Thank you.
Had a very busy time you have. Now, I know two councillors have expressed interest in asking you questions.
Yes.
And we're going to have to give you the same amount of time as everybody else. So can you keep your presentation with the expectation that they have read it?
Yes.
And so that they do have time to talk to you. Thank you.
That's all right. Have we started? Right, kia ora. Thank you everyone for having Hawke's Bay Tourism submit. I guess I will whiz through this because I think you have questions and I think that's probably more important. But firstly, I do want to acknowledge the Regional Council's support of Hawke's Bay Tourism over the last 6+ years, and particularly in relation to the strategic plan that you all agreed to heading into our 3rd financial year. We talked about wanting to achieve 5% growth per annum for visitor spend, and that would get us to close to $1 billion in visitor expenditure in Hawke's Bay by 2025. So I'm pleased to say that we are on track for that. So as of year-end March, we're at 596 million in terms of visitor spend into the region, and that is a 7% growth level, and the national average being 5%. So we're doing well and ahead of our competitors, which is fantastic. Your commitment has also seriously allowed us to leverage that funding to get funding from our operators, and obviously do some of the things that we've chosen to do over the last 5 years, like Hawke, like the Big Easy, and submit to things like the World Masters Games and the Marathon. So a conservative estimate would be that your funding has allowed us to generate an extra $500,000. We believe it's probably closer to 7, but we can account easily for about $500,000 from the industry. Back in 2015, we said that we would look at a seasonal growth strategy, and the campaign platform has very much been in a seasonal capacity. And as you can see from the figures here, we've achieved some really good results off the back of each of our seasons. So I don't know if you can, yours it's much larger up there than it is for me. 16% for spring, 18% for winter. Autumn 5% and summer up 10%. So as you can see, where it starts to really lift is when our funding increase came in, and that's because we had funding year round to promote Hawke's Bay. In terms of continued investment in tourism, and I guess we do operate in a highly competitive environment around the country. There are 31 regional tourism organisations, each have a budget, each are increasing their budgets and becoming slightly more adept at their marketing activities. And so us having a good solid budget and being able to advertise year round is essential for our continued growth. We also acknowledge that, we need new infrastructure. Tourism can't sit back and hope that what we currently have is going to see us through for the next 20 plus years. And so sustainable infrastructure for our communities and visitors is essential to help us grow and tell our stories, and also from an environmental point of view. New tourism businesses and opportunities are essential, and we are very lucky to have potentially Rocket Lab on our doorstep with huge opportunity, particularly for Northern Hawke's Bay, but for all of Hawke's Bay. And the relationship with Māori tourism is obviously ongoing, and there's a number of entities who are talking to us about how they could start and grow new young Māori tourism businesses. I should also say here, projects like the National Aquarium, in terms of where that project's going, that has a game-changing ability to change the infrastructure needs in Hawke's Bay from a visitor point of view. Hobbiton is probably the largest example of a built tourism project, and it has seriously changed the nature of tourism into the Waikato region. If we do what we want to do with the aquarium, potentially that could do the same for Hawke's Bay. So that is a game changer. Obviously, improving our environment helps to protect and tell our story for locals and all future visitors. Ultimately, tourism is a positive contributor both socially and economically. It is about more jobs. We're currently employing around 5,000 people in Hawke's Bay on a full-time capacity in tourism, and that is important, and we want that figure to grow. And obviously this leads to a much stronger economic result for Hawke's Bay. Our strategic plan, as we set out to you 2.5 years ago, is very much in the growth phase of visitor arrivals as well as spend. We represent 6% of GDP, and we believe we have contributed over 500,000 extra nights into Hawke's Bay on the back of consistent funding. I would say in terms of the rating increase, we did support the 4.88% rating increase, and this was generally related to our funding agreement with regional council, so that was the reason we went down that track. However, looking at the other option, we certainly support and endorse environmental improvement across the region, because it is both good for our locals as, of course, for visitors as well. So if that was the case, if that became the case, then obviously Hawke's Bay Tourism would support that. But we did take a tourism industry view on the selection of that rate increase. So that's it from me. Again, thank you for your ongoing support of Hawke's Bay Tourism.
Are you any questions? Paul, you have one to kick us off.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation, Annie. Do you think that improving the likes of Whakaki, Tutera, Whātuma, and restoring the health of those particular water bodies would be a boost to tourism?
I mean, any project that relates to the improving of our environment is very important from a tourism point of view. At the moment, those areas are not key tourism areas for Hawke's Bay, but obviously we want clean waterways and we want to have a safe and secure environment.
And yet you, in your presentation, you said that you're looking for new opportunities. You're looking for increasing Māori tourism. Do you not see the strategic opportunity for tourism in Hawke's Bay and improving the environmental outcomes for Whakaki, for Tutera and for Whātuma and for the Ahuriri Estuary?
I don't think anyone would say we didn't want environmental sustainable tourism products. I think we definitely do. What we would look at as an overall plan around how we would achieve those goals. I guess if this is directly related to the rating increase question, we felt that the 4.88 was related to our funding agreement, and that's why we chose to do that, but we certainly support, if the Regional Council goes down that route of a higher rate increase, we would support that.
Can you sense my frustration between that comment you just made there and the comment that you've made in your submission, where you said you're only going to support the 4.8% rate increase and not the 5% environmental kickstart fund?
Yes, I can, but again, from a tourism industry perspective, we've gone for the 4.88% increase, but we do acknowledge that the environment is a huge part to
Can
play.
you suggest, can you send a message back to the tourism industry that I'm finding it very difficult, I'll find it very difficult when it comes long-term plan time
to support any further funding for the tourism industry when they're not prepared to support the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Annie, and thank you for your submission and presentation. So you'll support the 4.88%, and you mentioned in your submission that there is something like cash and in-kind support of about $500,000 from the industry itself in Hawke's Bay. You didn't mention anything about support from the TLAs. Can you tell me whether you actually receive any support from
We
any
don't.
of the other councils?
We do on an event basis, but we don't receive any funding from a marketing perspective. So they don't contribute to our overall marketing of Hawke's Bay, but they do if the marathon, fork, the Big Easy, those types of events where they have a part to play, they do contribute.
Do you think there might be scope in the future to seek greater levels of support from them?
Potentially. I guess their argument's always been that they are there to build the infrastructure, and so therefore a project like the aquarium could well be in excess of sort of $30-40 million. So they would see their job as building the infrastructure, and our job is to promote that. We are working with them on smaller scale infrastructure projects and plans, so particularly with the announcement of the fund from central government, we're looking at areas with the most need, and so they will support those as well. But it's a little hard. Marketing and that infrastructure piece is considered quite separate by the TLAs currently.
Yeah, so I mean, sorry.
Thank you. Given that tourism's had a great period, do you feel that it's time for the burden of promoting tourism of Hawke's Bay to shift back to those who benefit directly, and that the council's funds should shift towards helping those elements of this region which can't raise funds for itself, such as Lake Tutira, Lake Whātuma and the Karamu Stream, because they're not commercial operating enterprises, they've got to get the money somewhere. So those who can generate the money should generate it for themselves, those who can't, we should give the money to them.
I think the thing with tourism, it has a huge flow-on effect for a large number of people within the community. So while some may benefit, obviously the flow-on effect is huge, and the employment of many, many people in lower-paying jobs is obviously part of that. We've seen examples of this very thing where regions have reduced their funding quite considerably, and they've worn it. And economically the region has suffered, Waikato being the most recent example, and they've spent 3 or 4 years kind of getting back to where they were. So it is, and it's an industry made up of thousands of members who are very small, sort of 1-2 people businesses that need that sort of regional approach to marketing in order to lift. A rising tide lifts all boats. It's that same principle. So in an ideal world, it would be wonderful if the industry could support, but we believe that the benefit of tourism in Hawke's Bay at 6% of GDP and 5,000 odd jobs and $600 million into the economy, you wouldn't want to dabble with that too much.
Annie, can you just remind us where you're at in this ramping up of the contribution from the council from the regional rate? Are you at the top point now?
We're into the final year, so we're heading into the final year as of July 1.
So the final year is this upcoming year?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Annie. We'll now break for a cup of tea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Mike Murray wanted a final comment. Did he?
That's always my favourite.
That was a great comeback, Mike. I loved it.